Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to, well, being the most informed person in the room. Today, we're diving into something pretty substantial. The 2018 Annual Shareholder Letter from Jamie Dimon at JPMorgan Chase. It's much more than just financial.
Oh, absolutely. That's really our mission today. I mean, look, 2018 looked great on paper, right? Record revenue, $111.5 billion. Record net income, $32.5 billion. They extended, $2.5 trillion in credit? Huge numbers.
Huge.
But this letter uses that as a jumping-off point. It dives deep into macroeconomics, their whole tech strategy, and what's really striking is this detailed public policy agenda. We're basically boiling this down to see how a giant like JPM saw the world back then and the future.
Okay, let's get into it. Starting right where the money is, the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That was massive for corporate America. How did it hit JPM's books? And maybe more importantly, what did they do with that windfall?
Well, the immediate impact, financially, pretty straightforward. It added $3.7 billion to their net income short-term. Big boost. But the real story, like you said, is what they did next, how they allocated that capital. They immediately committed to what Dimon called a massive increase in long-term investments. They explicitly chose organic growth over just, handing it all back immediately.
And these weren't just like vague investments in the future. They were pretty specific, weren't they? Tech, obviously, but also physical stuff, planning 400 new Chase branches.
Right, 400 new branches over the next few years.
And also investing in their own people, raising the minimum wage for entry-level folks in the U.S. to $31,000 a year. That says something about where they saw value, doesn't it?
It really does, and it ties directly into their core philosophy, what they famously call the fortress balance sheet. It's this idea, really hammered home since the 2008 crisis, that you need this non-negotiable buffer.
Like an insurance policy.
Exactly, and the scale is immense. Their key safety capital measure, the CET1 ratio, was up to 12%. Their total liquidity was $755 billion. We're talking multiples higher in terms of loss-absorbing capacity compared to before the crisis. It's foundational for them.
Okay, so fortress first. But speaking of capital, the letter gets into stock buybacks. That was a really hot topic after the tax cuts, right? Lots of companies doing huge buybacks.
It's a huge debate.
Dimon calls them essential, but how does that square with prioritizing long-term investment? Seems like a contradiction.
Well, the letter lays out a clear hierarchy. That's the key. Investing in the business, tech, people, branches, growth always comes first, period.
Okay.
Buybacks are secondary. The argument is, look, if you've funded all your good growth opportunities and your stock is trading at or below, say, tangible book value, buying it back is just smart capital return, almost automatic.
So not just throwing cash out, but a disciplined way to return value when maybe the huge growth projects aren't immediately there.
Precisely. It's framed as financial hygiene almost. And they even say buybacks can make sense at, up to 2 times tangible book value if needed. But the main goal, the benchmark they set, was hitting over 15% return on tangible common equity ROTCE.
ROTCE. Okay, break that down quickly.
Yeah, it's basically how much profit they generate from the capital shareholders have actually put in, the tangible stuff.
Yeah.
Aiming for 15% plus meant they were focused on deploying that fortress capital really efficiently, generating strong returns.
Got it. Okay, let's pivot to that organic growth you mentioned.
Yeah.
The plan seems pretty integrated. Expanding the physical branches to reach, 93% of the U.S. population by 2022?
93%.
Why double down on brick and mortar when everyone's saying banking is going totally digital?
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, right? But the thinking is, for complex advice, big decisions, mortgages, investments, people often still want face-to-face interaction. But that physical network is underpinned by massive digital improvements. Like in their consumer bank, they got the digital account opening down to just 3 to 5 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes. Wow.
Yeah. And that speed helped bring in 1.5 million new accounts pretty quickly after launch. So digital efficiency supports the physical presence.
And that speed applies elsewhere, too. I saw the note about the Chase My Home digital mortgage. They said it's 20% faster than the old paperweight.
Exactly. 20% faster. That's a measurable improvement, and it's a competitive advantage. They're streamlining things, pre-filling info for existing customers where possible. And importantly, they also launched new lending products around them.
Ah, yes. My Chase Plan and My Chase Loan. What was the strategy there?
Well, think about the rise of buy now, pay later, and fintech lenders. These were JPM's answer. Installment loan options directly tied to your Chase account.
Okay, so keeping customers within the Chase ecosystem.
Absolutely. They estimated competitors held something like $250 billion in card loans that these products could potentially capture. It was an aggressive move to defend their turf and offer more flexibility.
And powering all this, the letter talks about going all in on tech, specifically cloud computing and AI machine learning. Cloud's not just about storage these days, is it?
No, not at all. It's about speed and agility. The letter really emphasizes how the cloud lets them scale up or down quickly, test new ideas faster, deploy applications much more rapidly. It's fundamental to their pace.
And AML, where does that fit in?
That's where you see really direct, tangible benefits, especially around risk, like fraud detection and lending decisions.
Okay, give us an example. What kind of impact are we talking?
Well, first, they projected about $150 million in annual benefits just from AI applications alone.
Okay, decent number.
But here's the specific bit that's kind of mind-blowing. They said machine learning allowed them to approve 1 million additional good customers.
1 million.
Yeah, customers who previously might have been flagged as potentially fraudulent by older, cruder models. But at the same time, the ML helped them decline 1 million additional actual fraudsters who might have slipped through before.
Wow. So 1 million more good ones, 1 million fewer bad ones. That's incredibly precise.
It shows the power of the technology. But of course, if AI is getting that good at complex tasks, there's a flip side, right? The impact on jobs.
Right. Does the letter address that?
It does, quite directly. They acknowledge that automation driven by AI will reduce the need for certain kinds of work. And they state pretty clearly that JPM has a responsibility to plan for that, to retrain and redeploy people whose jobs might be affected. It's about managing the transition.
That focus on the workforce is actually a perfect segue. Because after laying out how strong the bank is, Dowman makes this sharp turn, looking outward. He says the American dream is alive, but fraying for many. Why does a bank CEO suddenly start diagnosing America's social problems in a shareholder letter?
Well, think about it. JPM's success, its long-term growth, it's ultimately tied to the health of the U.S. economy, right? If the broader system is struggling, that eventually limits the bank's potential, too. The letter draws a direct line between national issues and, ultimately, corporate performance.
Okay, so what's the diagnosis? What metrics does he use to say the dream is fraying?
He uses some pretty stark data points, things like stagnant middle-class incomes over decades, the fact that 40% of American workers were earning less than $15 an hour, and maybe the most jarring one, 40% of Americans didn't have $400 saved for an emergency.
Wow. 40% can't cover a $400 surprise bill.
Yeah. It highlights widespread financial fragility, and he contrasts this micro-level stress with the macro picture.
Which was?
The claim is the post-recession recovery was historically weak, only 20% growth over 10 years, when DeMine argues a normal recovery should have delivered maybe 40% growth. That gap, that missing 20%, that represents trillions in lost potential GDP. That's the core of the diagnosis.
So that missing growth isn't just bad luck, it's a symptom of deeper problems.
Exactly. The letter argues it's the result of systemic structural barriers that America just hasn't fixed, things holding back productivity and opportunity.
Okay, let's tick through those barriers he identified. Starts with human capital.
Right. First, education. Specifically, high schools and community colleges aren't equipping people with the skills needed for today's available jobs. Big skills gap.
Okay.
Second, healthcare costs, ballooning to nearly 20% of GDP. But it's not just a budget issue. He points out that 70% of young people, aged 17-24, are ineligible for military service, often due to health reasons like obesity or diabetes. That's a national readiness issue tied to health.
70% ineligible. That's staggering. Okay, so human capital is struggling. What about physical capital?
That's barrier 3, infrastructure, roads, bridges, grids. The U.S. isn't even ranked in the top 20 developed nations. He estimates a $4 trillion need just for repairs and modernization. Plus, the process to build anything is incredibly slow and complex.
Right, the permitting nightmares.
Which ties into barrier 4, the litigation system. The cost of lawsuits and legal friction is estimated at 1.6% of GDP, which is a full percentage point higher than the average developed country. That's a tax on everything.
And the last one loops back to human capital again, immigration policies.
Exactly. Hindering growth, he argues, by making it hard for skilled immigrants, especially those with advanced STEM degrees educated in the U.S., to stay. He cites that 40% of foreign students with those degrees are forced to leave.
So you add up education, health, infrastructure, litigation, immigration. Diamond basically calculates that political gridlock and failure to address these issues has cost the U.S. about 1% in GDP growth per year.
Yeah, he puts a number on the cost of dysfunction. It's a quantifiable drag.
So the solution proposed is what? Just do better?
Pretty much. Set aside the partisan fighting and self-interest. But then the letter does wade into the bigger economic system debate. It acknowledges capitalism isn't perfect, that it leaves people behind.
But he pushes back against traditional socialism.
Right. He argues that system inevitably produces stagnation, corruption, and often worse. He contrasts it with what he calls successful social democracies elsewhere, suggesting targeted reforms within the capitalist framework are the way to go.
Okay, so what specific reforms does he champion?
He offers several concrete ideas, like expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit, the EITC. He suggests making it more like a negative income payroll tax, so low-income workers get that boost reliably with each paycheck, not just once a year.
Interesting. Putting money directly into workers' pockets. What else?
Mandatory preschool starting at age 3, a foundational investment in education. And on infrastructure, he points to models in places like Germany and Canada.
How do they do it differently?
They have more streamlined, often single-agency permitting processes. He calls for adopting something similar to permitting times from, sometimes a decade down to maybe 2-3 years. Imagine the boost if you could actually build things efficiently.
Yeah, that would be transformative. This leads to maybe the trickiest part. The call for CEOs themselves to step up on public policy. Is that genuine civic concern, or is it just smart PR for a big bank?
Well, it's probably a bit of both, isn't it? But the pressure seems real. He cites the Edelman Trust Barometer, which found 76% of people actually want CEOs to take stands on broader issues, not just their own company's narrow interests.
So public expectation is shifting.
Seems so. And JPM tries to show they're walking the walk, mentioning their $150 million commitment to help revitalize Detroit, which started back in 2014, and their Entrepreneurs of Color Fund, which had grown to around $40 million across several cities by then. The message is, business has a role and a responsibility beyond just profits.
So zooming all the way out, we started with tax cuts and bank capital, and we ended up talking about fixing preschool, healthcare, and infrastructure policy. It's an amazing arc, showing how interconnected corporate strategy and national well-being really are in this view.
It really is. The letter functions as this grand statement on systemic thinking. But, to leave you with one final thought, there's also a pretty stark warning tucked in there about future risks.
Oh, what's that?
David mentions observing some unexpectedly rapid losses of market liquidity back in the fourth quarter of 2018, even though markets were relatively stable overall. It worried him, and he warns that, looking ahead, in the next real downturn, banks might actually be far more constrained in their ability to support the markets and lend. And the reason? New regulations. He argues some of them are pro-cyclical.
Pro-cyclical. That sounds bad in a crisis. What does that mean exactly?
It means the rules essentially make the cycle worse. So regulations might require banks to hold more capital and be more cautious in good times, which sounds sensible.
Right.
But the pro-cyclical part is if those same rules automatically force banks to pull back lending, sell assets, and hoard capital during a downturn, precisely when the economy desperately needs credit and liquidity, the rules themselves could amplify the crisis.
Wow. So the safety measures could inadvertently squeeze the system when it's already gasping for air.
That's the concern he raises. It forces capital to the sidelines right when it's needed most.
Which leaves a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. If another recession is coming, as the letter implies is inevitable, what ultimately determines how we fare? Is it the strength of individual fortress balance sheets like JPM's? Or is it our collective political will to finally tackle those big, messy structural problems, education, healthcare, infrastructure, that Diamond argues are the real foundation of America's long-term economic future? Something to chew on until our next deep dive.